When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews. And Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. And then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said to them, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." And when he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit. And if you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. And if you retain the sins of any, they are retained." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Well, we know the story well. It's not a shock to us. We've gone over this story to the disciples. It's a shock. They're in hiding behind closed doors. He's already appeared to them, but now they're hiding, and they're hiding now behind closed doors. He reappears again. He says, "Peace to you," twice. He shows them the wounds in his hands and in his side. And he does, while he's doing all this, he does something strange for us. He breathes on them. He breathes on his disciples. And having breathed on them, he says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." And so I want to spend a little bit of time with that. But first, just want to note the first few words of the scripture this morning. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week. First thing that we notice is it's evening. And last week we were in Luke, now we're in John. This evening on Easter Day. Last week was evening on Easter Day when they sat around the table with Cleopas and the other. Today they're hiding in an upper room, or not an upper room, but just a room. Probably is the upper room. And the Greek word "evening," the writers of the Gospels of any of the letters or any of the writings in the Bible, they're very deliberate about what they're doing. This word for evening actually only appears twice in John's Gospel. And it also occurs in John chapter 6. And John wants us to notice. And when you put the two stories together, they have a lot of similarities. First, of course, John 6, we have the feeding of, we've just had the feeding of 5,000. And the crowd is so impressed, who does this, right? So they want to force Jesus to be king. And when Jesus realizes what they're all about, he withdraws to a mountain by himself, leaving the disciples. In the meantime, the evening is coming upon them, and his disciples, they're down. They go down to the sea. They get into a boat and start to cross over the sea. And you already know the story. It's dark, the wind's blowing, the sea is rough. And when they had rowed, must have been very athletic people. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus walking on the sea, and they were terrified. And Jesus says to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." And he comes walking to them on the water. They see him, and he says, "It is I, do not be afraid." In our story this morning, we've got a lot of similarities with that one. Evening, it's dark, Jesus is nowhere to be found. The disciples are huddled together behind a locked door. They are frightened. So we've got these two stories mixing together in our minds: the darkness, the small space they find themselves, metaphorically at sea. In both cases, Jesus making his appearance among them. And he says to them, "Do not be afraid." He calms their fears. He utters his voice and speaks, "Peace be with you." In John chapter 6, "It is I, do not be afraid." But he's speaking to them. He's come to them and calms their fears. And so John is mixing up these stories, evoking the metaphors, kind of setting the stage for us. They're hiding behind these locked doors, afraid. And we understand, we know why they're afraid. They're afraid of the Jews. They had captured Jesus, had crucified Jesus. They know they're next on the list. When the word Jew is used, it doesn't always mean exactly the same thing. Sometimes you got to read the context. Sometimes it means something a little different than in another context. In some places, the word Jew, it means entirely the Jewish people. It can be that. Or it can be a reference to just simply those residents who live in Jerusalem. It can be that. Or it can mean just simply the Jewish authorities, the ones in power. It can be that. It can also mean the opponents of Jesus. In this case, the disciples are afraid of the Jewish authorities. When John says the Jews, he's speaking about a smaller group of Jewish authorities. They are afraid of the Sanhedrin, the chief priests who arrested the Lord and had him crucified. And so they're in hiding. Then Jesus appears to them. The first thing he says, what does he say? The first thing he says, the first thing he wants them to hear, we're living in very anxious times. People are anxious, families are anxious. There is an anxiety that is relentlessly stoked by a fundamentalist mindset in the media and in politics, which says that we are under a threat. Everything has changed for the worse. Things are going bad. And there's them and there's us, and they're out to get us. Them's out to get us. And so it's a dangerous moment we live in. We're not far away from losing something incredibly precious to us if we don't do something. And so there's this real thing, which is right there in front of us, which is then exaggerated beyond all proportion. There's a building on a kernel of truth, but then it's hyped up and it's whipped into a fear, into a frenzy, and it's just continually hyped and hyped and hyped to the point that we're given a very distorted, we begin to have a very distorted view of reality, which is originally born out of something that is real. Except that the real is now buried deep under layers of this heavy cloak of anxiety. And all we have now, we've lost touch with the reality. And all we have now is just the anxiety. And Jesus comes to the disciples in their fear, bearing peace to them. They're locked behind closed doors. And together, using the metaphor, combining the metaphors of chapter 6, together in a boat, upon a stormy sea, anxious and afraid. And Jesus is nowhere. And Jesus comes and says, "Do not be afraid. Peace be with you." Now, the interesting thing about Jesus is he doesn't try to argue them out of their fear. He doesn't try to use reason. And he doesn't say, "Hey, you've got this. These are the facts over here. You've got it all wrong. You're overreacting." He doesn't say any of that. I mean, when people are afraid, you don't convince them by trying to use the facts. When people are in anxiety, the facts aren't going to change anything. They aren't going to do anything. He comes to them and he's present among them and he shows them his wounds and he gives them his peace. He deals not with the facts, but with the anxiety, the fear. In the CDC today, between the years 2009 and 2019, these are statistics about our young people, about teens. In that 10-year period from 2009 to 2019, a percentage of teens who reported to have persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness rose from 26% to 37%. In 2001, that figure rose to 44%. And, maybe there's a lot of blame about mainstream media and social media, cable news and all that. But I wonder if our adult culture war is taking place. Our adult anxieties are being radiated out all over our children, all over our kids. Anxiety. It's highly contagious. And start bleeding anxiety, and before you know it, everybody else has got it on. I mean, that's just how anxiety works. And there's an epidemic of mental health crisis among our children, among our youth. 63% of college students pre-pandemic in 2018 reported feeling overwhelming anxiety. Now, there's a normal anxiety. Our young teens struggling with anxiety. A normal anxiety, they're away from home for the first time. Of course, normal anxiety. But this is different. This is not just worries. This is crippling, overwhelming anxiety. 63%. And what does Jesus do? What's his first thing he does? Peace be with you. I mean, this is a wonderful gift. This wonderful gift. The greatest gift that can be given. Peace. The greatest gift we have. Peace with God. Peace with one another. I mean, a parent, that's what you want to do with a child, right? With your children. You want to give your children peace. You want them to have joy. We want to give this to our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, to be non-anxious. To give them a home where they don't have to deal with all the stuff of the world. A non-anxious presence. Even when you're feeling deeply anxious yourself, you're not going to bleed it all over those around you. You're going to take care of them. You want them to have peace. You want to give them peace, your children. Greatest gift a parent can give in a home, I think. I mean, I know we're an older congregation, but we have grandchildren. We have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. And we're concerned about the children in our community. How many of you are teachers, retired teachers? We care. Young people, they know about the world. They know the world. They know all about 9/11. They know about the wars. They know about injustice in our streets, protests and demonstrations. They know all that stuff. We can't fully protect them from all that stuff. They know about that. But we do what Jesus did. We give peace when there is no peace. The home can be a place of peace. A place of love where family members can know peace, can know joy, laugh and sing and have fun together. Anxiety, when it's in the home, has a greater impact on our children than anything that could be happening, say 9/11. It's a terrible thing, happens not 800 miles away. Anxiety in the home has a greater impact on the family's children's life than that thing that happening at 800 miles away. Anxiety about 9/11 in the home. Mom and dad are radiating anxiety about that stuff out there in the world. Really big impact on children. And kids are going to catch what parents are radiating. But I'm thinking about Jesus now. He could have been bitter about everything that had just happened to him. I mean, they had failed him, Peter had denied him, Judas had betrayed him, and all of them had run away and disappeared. Jesus could have been bitter. He could have berated them. He could have rebuked them. Good-for-nothing cowards. Where were they? Castigated them in the harshest way. Instead of shaming them, which he could have done, instead of embarrassing them in the harshest way, instead he comes bearing peace. He could have radiated all that anxiety about everything that had gone wrong and how they had failed. Wrong. He could have named it all. The very first thing, though, what he says is, peace be with you. Let yourself feel that for a moment. Let yourself feel it. This moment. It's a beautiful expression of who Jesus is and what he's all about. He didn't just start saying this all of a sudden after the resurrection. He's been saying it all along. I mean, we go back several chapters, we find Jesus again and again and again talking of peace in John chapter 14. Peace I leave you. I leave with you. My peace I give to you. He knows what's coming. I do not give to you as the world gives. And we know what kind of peace the world gives, don't we? I mean, Vladimir Putin is claiming to be bringing peace to Ukraine through a special military operation of denazification. I mean, we know how the world uses the word peace. Jesus, do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives. John chapter 16. And I have said to you this so that you may have peace. In the world you face persecution, but take courage. I have conquered the world. And they see it. They see it in his scarred hands, in his scarred side. They see, yes, he has conquered the world. And again, Jesus says in chapter 20, peace be with you. And as the Father has sent me, so I send you. Let yourself feel it for a moment. Everything out there wants you to be afraid. Everything out there wants you to feel anxious. Let yourself instead now, for this moment, feel the peace Jesus is giving you. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. The whole work of Jesus, his ministry, it is all about bringing peace to a world that knows no peace. He embodies peace. The peace that he has in himself, he's giving to them, his disciples. He's giving to you from the very beginning. All about his ministry from beginning to end has always been about peace, bringing peace. So we are given this peace that has been grounded in the solid ground, built on the solid ground of Jesus' faithful accomplishment on the cross. It's not our invention. We're just simply standing on what God has created for us. And so we're given the tools, we're given the resources to do the spiritual work of facing and growing and working and growing through and managing our anxiety. And like Jesus, become people of peace who give peace. The doors are locked. You're hiding behind the doors because they have no peace. Yet Jesus comes and reveals himself to them, and suddenly they see and rejoice. And what they didn't have, what they had no inkling of just a moment before, now they had theirs. They're overflowing with it. And Jesus foresaw all this. He saw it coming. He knew what was coming. Very truly, earlier he said, very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn. He just saw it. This is coming. But the world, they will rejoice. You will have pain, but your pain will turn into joy. When a woman is in labor, this is chapter 16, she has pain because her hour has come. But when her child is born, she no longer remembers the anguish because of the joy of having brought a human being into the world. So you have pain now. But I will see you again, and your hearts will rejoice, and no one will take your joy from you. Sorrow for a season, but then joy. They see the marks of his triumph in his hands and in his side, the marks of his love, and the triumph over those things. And they have peace. Their pain turned to joy. And just as he had promised to them earlier in the Gospel of John, he's delivering to them, peace be with you. But then, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. That's the word apostello. As the Father, apostle. As the Father has sent me, so now I send you. You are to be my apostle. You are to speak with my voice, and you bear the authority of my own voice with you. Go then and be like me. Speak peace into the world. And act and speak with my full authority in the world. Remember John 3:17, God did not send, apostello, again, did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. John 5, the works that the Father has given me to complete, the very works that I'm doing. And what kind of works is he doing? In the Gospels, we see him doing saving works, forgiving, teaching, healing, restoring, testifying on behalf of the Father that he has sent me. So again, and just as the living Father sent me, I live because the Father. I live because of the Father. So also, and so whoever eats with me will live because of me. That's also in chapter 6. So we are to be, we follow in his footsteps. We bear the news of the gospel as Jesus did. Empowered now because we have his Spirit upon us. And I offer this to you in the name of the Father, Son,